99.999% of everybody born will be forgotten in 3 or 4 generations. They won't even remember who you are. I have no idea who my great-great-great-parents are. I don't even know their names, and I'm certainly not thinking about them. And the same will be true for me. No matter what I do, I won't be remembered. So you have to kind of make a difference right now.
Hey crew, it's Adam. This is The Conversation, and we are now at episode 258, and this is an episode that is absolutely filled with wisdom. We have the founding editor of Wired magazine on the podcast, and he might just be one of the most fascinating, interesting people you will ever cross paths with today. Wherever you are, I'm so glad that you're tuning in, and in these next 28 or so minutes, my hope is if you're trying to figure out how to make a difference with your life, or you're walking through an unpretty part of being human, I want you to know that you are not alone. Well, before we go any further, I want to give a huge shout out to our partner. Each week, these partners help make the conversations possible. They're also businesses and organizations that I know and trust that I want you to know about as well. I fully believe in these partners. Today's partner is Vern Eide. Vern Eide is a faith-based, employee-owned company that sells cars, trucks, tractors, boats, snowmobiles, and more. They even mentioned tractors. They sell tractors. They also sell Hondas and Fords and Acuras and Chevys and GMC. You name the make of vehicle and they most likely have it. I've mentioned this before. I just recently purchased my third vehicle from Vern Eide, a brand new Outlander, and I absolutely love this vehicle. I've gotten so many compliments. People have said, hey, how much does this cost? Hey, what do you love about it? I can't tell enough people about it. Throughout the process, Vern Eide was amazing to talk with. I never felt pressured or hurried whatsoever. If you're looking for a vehicle, they most likely have it, and no matter where you live, they will ship it to you. Go visit verneide.com. Again, that's verneide.com. Okay, so I already mentioned it. We have the founding editor of Wired magazine with us today. His name is Kevin Kelly, and I first came across Kevin through my friend Brad Lomenick. Huge shout out to you, Brad. I love you. But Kevin, listen to this, is a self-proclaimed radical optimist and hoarder of quotes on life advice. And over the years, Kevin has compiled his favorite pieces of wisdom, particularly things that he wished he would have known when he was younger. Well, on his 68th birthday, he gifted these pieces of wisdom to his own adult children. Well, the results, they ended up going viral, so much so that Kevin ended up publishing these pieces of wisdom in a book. Advice ranging from how to find lost items around your house to attending funerals and just about everything in between. Friends, I hope you enjoy and are fascinated by this conversation as much as I was. As always, sit back, relax, and enjoy.
I have no stress. I've never really had stress.
Really?
So
share about.
Yeah, I'm one of the most stress-free people that you'll meet.
Whoa. What ingredients to that? Like, would you be one to share that?
Genetics. I picked my parents very well.
But just share more. Like, as far as like, is there anything that you like would be transferable to someone who doesn't have the same genetics?
I don't know. Like, one of my superpowers is sleep. I'm one of the best sleepers I know, and maybe that's part of the solution. I'm a little bit like a robot. I just have a switch. I lay down, I turn it off, and then in the morning I turn it back on. And that I think helps. I generally, I would say I engineer my life in some ways to have just the right amount of healthy, I wouldn't call it stress, but healthy challenges.
Whoa.
I mean, like stress in a certain sense, like when you're running uphill, when you're doing calisthenics, that's kind of a stress.
Yep.
And if you are taking on a project that you haven't done before and don't know you can do, you could say, well, there's an element of stress in that, in the sense that you are stretching,
Yep.
and those kinds of things I do. So, but that's not what people usually think of as being stressed or stressed out. Um, and so, yeah, I'm going to disappoint you with
No, this
not
isn't.
having much.
This isn't disappointing at all. It's actually gives even more street cred to what we'll talk about in a little bit, which is life advice. Are there anything else like lifestyle wise that you think like has allowed you to say, yeah, just low amounts of stress? That's genuinely fascinating.
Um, I'm not sure if, again, there are things that I do, but I want to be clear that I have no idea whether other people will work for them. So I wrote a book of advice, and some of the bits of advice is that forgiveness is not something you do for other people; it's something you do for yourself. So I've learned to be very good forgiving, very quickly. Uh, um, the people you forgive might not notice, but it'll heal you. Um, the same thing with kind of envy. Envy is actually kind of a toxin, and what I try to do, and I've learned to do better, is to celebrate when other people do well, to celebrate their successes as if they were my success.
Ugh.
And that increases the happiness all around. It's one way you can increase it. Another one is sort of this is also something I do kind of deliberately, which is when you kind of encounter somebody who seems to be evil or bad, they're a torturer or murderer, is rather than wishing them harm, you try and wish that they would feed the hungry and help the orphans. You wish good on them. And that, I think, also is something that comes back to you. So the thing I say is that the most selfish thing that you can do for yourself is to be generous.
Ugh.
Though it's really kind of weird that if you're continually the way to actually, the way to bring abundance to yourself is to give it away. I mean, it's a weird paradox of the universe. And so I try to increase my practice of that. So
Yeah.
so I think all those things help.
Yeah. No, that was beautiful. Okay, so maybe just the kind of we'll come back to advice. The Cliff Notes version of your story, Kevin. Yeah, just whatever like whether it's career.
Uh-huh.
Just if you don't want to give the Cliff Notes version for someone who's new to you and who you are.
Introducing myself.
Yeah, that would be just professionally, just kind of the journey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Boy. Okay. So I would start by saying I would start in reverse. So I would do a reverse chronological. So right now I am a radical optimist. And my job is to try and describe a future filled with AI, genetic engineering, constant monitoring that I like to live in. Maybe you like to live in too. And before that, I've been writing books about technology and with a very optimistic bent, trying to imagine the future. And I've been doing that for a number of years, and a lot of it has come true. So I get points for that. And then before that, I was one of the co-founders of Wired magazine 31 years ago, starting up at a time when it was not cool to be a nerd. Nerds were still the people who were beat up in high school. And part of our agenda was to make nerds cool to make them the heroes, and that's happened. You have the Bill Gates and you have the Steve Jobs. And before that, I was editing, publishing the magazine that was one of the very first subscription only publications, and it was user generated content, but on newsprint. It was before the internet. And I worked for the whole catalog, which was the internet, as Steve Jobs says, it was the internet before there was an internet. It was on internet on newsprint. And before that, I was traveling in Asia with a camera, documenting the disappearing cultures of Asia. And I arrived there by dropping out of college and going to Asia instead. And so, and then further back in high school, I was a science and math and art nerd. I took all the science and math classes and art. And that's sort of, and then I guess the last thing I would say, I'm a lifelong maker. Been making things. I have a studio here, which you can't see, with all kinds of stuff in it. And I was been making things since I was a kid. I made a nature museum when I was 10. Trains when I was 10, and a nature museum when I was 12. I did a chemistry lab. So I am part of the maker strand. They didn't have a name until 15 years ago. But that's what I realized. That's what I was.
No, that's
the story in short.
So Kevin, you've put together this book of life advice, and maybe two questions before we hop into a couple of them. How long were you intentionally putting them together? And I know that the heart was for your children. If you just want to even share more about just that specifically, like, had you been thinking about it for some time of wanting to pass it on to your children? Just kind of share just a little bit of that. I'm just kind of curious myself.
Yeah. There were two strands. One strand was that we didn't really give any advice to our kids. I was much more of the school of thought that your kids don't pay any attention to what you say. They only pay attention to what you do. So our intent was to model the behavior that we wanted rather than to preach to them. So we didn't really say very much about that, and which is in part why later on in this collection, I decided, but I wish I'd heard these when I was younger. I wish that my parents had said this, because they were the same way. So that's when I gifted it to them, the bits. But I started collecting the bits that other people said for a very long time. I was just a hoarder of quotes from other people. And so I always liked those kinds of quotes because I found that they were handy, that they were more reminders than anything. You kind of knew it, but I wanted some way to repeat them to myself. And there was one particular quote that I still use, and I repeated it, and that was sort of part of the genesis of making a list for my kids. Was, and the bit of advice was, if you are looking for something in your home that you know that you have, but you can't find it because you put it somewhere, and then you finally find it, when you're done with it, don't return it to where you found it. Return it to where you first looked for it. Okay? And I use that all the time when I'm on the hunt for things. It's like I'm gonna, and so that idea of having something useful was, so I decided to start to write down things like that, that I thought would be good reminders, and that became this list that I gave to my kids on my 68th birthday as a birthday present. The idea that you give gifts on your birthday rather than get them, and so that was the beginning, and it kind of went viral. It went into the social nets, and people loved it. And I was encouraged then to do that every birthday for a couple of years. And then at that point, they were kind of all over the internet. It was like, I think it should just be in a book that you could hand to somebody as a graduation gift. And that was the genesis.
Lovely, lovely. Okay, so I'm going to hop into a couple of the ones, and I was looking through them myself earlier and really tried to find the ones that I just was personally curious about. The first one, a great way to understand yourself is to seriously reflect on everything you find irritating in others.
Yeah.
Give us the heart behind that.
Yeah. It's not necessarily that, although sometimes it is true that you can get annoyed at people who have the same flaw that you have. But there's also a sense in which, even if it isn't, it's sometimes it's a way of illuminating your own self. I think we're really opaque to ourselves. I mean, that's partly why therapy and all is so prevalent, is that any human, we don't have good access to our own motivations, to our own thinking. We're really opaque. And so this is reflecting on what we get annoyed is another way for us to examine our own prejudices, assumptions, flaws, whatever. And so when you do that, we look at what causes, and you go back and say, well, why is it? And sometimes it is because you have that trait, and sometimes it is because there's some other trait that you have that you weren't even aware of. And so anything that can enable us to see ourselves better is really going to help us in our own journey on landing at that place where we are doing the thing that we can best do and no one else. And that's my favorite piece of advice in the book, which is don't aim to be the best. Aim to be the only. And so that is a very high bar, being the only. And in order to get there, you kind of have to know what it is about yourself that's the only. And that's not something that you can really do by yourself. One of the weird things of the universe is that it takes the entire world and everybody around you for you to become unique. Okay, unique is not a solo project. It requires friends and family and colleagues and customers and everybody else to help you see and move you in the direction of becoming the only.
Well, something you've mentioned several times is just reflection and thoughtfulness. Two things that don't seem to be common traits. And it's easy to always say common traits in our world, but even common trait in my life, busyness and just running from one thing to the next. It takes such intentionality to have that thoughtfulness and just even self-reflection. Is a muscle that you just have to continue using. Otherwise, it's just not there. Kevin, another one, you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. I'm just like, man, I need to have that written on my forehead maybe. Just share about that.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that goes back to maybe having the stress-free life is the reason why you don't need to attend every argument that you're invited to is because most arguments are not about the argument, which is why they can't be settled by arguing. They're usually about something much deeper, some emotional needs or basic assumptions about the universe, and so that's why you kind of don't want to attend to everyone, because they aren't going to be settled by arguing.
Ugh. Okay, another one. If you are the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Hang out with and learn from people smarter than yourself.
Yeah, that's the secret. And the other corollary to that. And by the way, I've learned so much by hanging out with people who are smarter than myself. And I would say I have, permission, or I am allowed to, or I am invited to hang out with people smarter than myself, because this is one of the earlier bits of advice, which is that enthusiasm is worth 25 IQ points. And so even though I'm not as smart as them, I am enthusiastic. I am optimistic. I am interested in that. And those count for a lot, because smartness and intelligence is sort of overrated. Whoa. And to get things done in the world, you need to be more than just intelligent. And some of the most important things in our lives are not going to be solved by logic alone. And so you have to offset your IQ with other qualities. And so if you have those other qualities in abundance, they can often offset your IQ.
That's fascinating. Okay, I'll do one more. Collecting things benefits you only if you display your collection prominently and share it with joy with others. The opposite of this is hoarding. You talked
Right.
about generosity earlier, but share that. And
Right.
maybe if you're willing, share practically what that looks like in your life.
Well, I should drag the camera around because I have open shelves. So going down to the principle. The principle is that, yeah, you may have a collecting gene, and that's fine. And there's something admirable about things, but you need to share them. Um, that should be the impetus. And that's like the Maria Kondo. So it's like um, you want to make sure that the things you have are sparking joy, and if you not, you move them on, you get them moving, and you keep yourself surrounded by things that are visibly out and open, and that you can enjoy and can share with others to enjoy. And so that can manage that impulse to have really cool stuff. And so in our household, there's another piece of advice, which is before anything is bought, we have to agree on where it's going to go. Does it have a place to live? Okay, and that also requires something else to leave. Okay, so it's like a book can't come in unless the book leaves. And so that constant reviewing of things makes sure that we're surrounded by stuff that brings us joy and other people joy. And people come into the office really enjoy it because things are out in the open and they're visible. And I have a collection of weird stuff that I've gotten over the time, but it's all right there, and that's all there is. And so I think whether it's clothes or Pez dispensers, whatever it is, they should be they should be something that you're sharing. And if they don't work anymore, then you move them on and you replace them with things that bring you joy.
That's good. So, Kevin, so much of what you're sharing is just like solid wisdom, advice on how to get that, like throughout our everyday life. Like, because, advice on how to get wisdom.
Well, I think one of the central themes or central skills to do that is to change, to elevate your horizon, to elevate your time horizon, to think in terms of decades, to take a longer view, to realize that when you're making investments that may not pay off for 10 years or 20 years, that I'm going to take some money and invest it into myself right now, rather than going on vacation. I may take a class, whatever it is. So I'm investing to my future self. And that, I think, also, again, if you realize that, most arguments don't really matter in the short term, maybe some do in the long term, that's fine, you can address those, but most of them are not, you're not going to remember in a month from now. And so you skip them and you elevate and you take a longer view of the world. So I think a longer view, just thinking about, will this matter in 20 years? What is important over a 20-year horizon? And that, I think, for me, is one of the most helpful things about trying to cultivate wisdom.
And is that just an internal thing? Is that with others? Like, what does that look like for you to find that? Because I think that's wisdom. Lately in my own life, I've been hungry for wisdom.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I try to associate with people who I feel have wisdom. I'm not really interested in smart people. I'm interested in wise people hanging out. So I think it's like a lot of things. Tim Ferriss says that you are the average of the 5 people that you hang around with the most. So you want to associate with people that have wisdom. That's helpful in terms of being able to model that. But I think, and then, working with or for people, institutions that themselves are capable of having a longer term view of things. They're not just trying to maximize the next quarter or the next, they're not, basically anything like get rich fast is the completely wrong direction. So you just walk away immediate. If there's any sense that this is get rich fast, something instant and quick, no. It's because the only things that happen fast are bad things. Bad things happen fast. All the good things happen slowly.
Whoa.
And so you want to align yourself with those kind of slower things. If it's fast and instant, very unlikely to be good. I mean, there are some things that are not like that. Saying thank you, being grateful should be instant, should be fast. But anything complicated or big, it's not going to work on a short, immediate time scale. And so I think you want to associate yourself with people and institutions that are capable of taking a longer view of things.
Last question I have is there's been something you've learned recently when it comes to making a difference with your life? Leaving a mark long after you've passed, anything specifically that you've learned about making a difference in the lives of others?
I did a very large graphic novel with some people from church. They were all fellow church people who happened to work at Pixar. They worked at ILM. One guy works at NVIDIA. And the premise of this book was that the major thing is that because it postulated in the angelic realms were these intangible beings, we call them angels, who look down upon our time on earth with bodies, and they weep because we're squandering this time. So the reason why we're here now, that we have bodies, is that this is where we can have impact. We have intangible bodies. If you're made of light, if you're kind of in this realm, it's hard to have any impact on anything because it's like, what's there? You're done. I mean, it's like, I don't know, you're in some kind of thing. What happens? Like in heaven, it's like totally crazy. It sounds boring to me. It's like, what do you do? There's no consequence for things. So here, right now, this ride that we have maximum impact. We're given this very short time to have bodies and to be able to impact other people and have effect and see the consequences. And it's like, and so the major thing is to appreciate that this moment now is when we can actually make effect, have impact. And we wanted to maximize that for good. And it doesn't matter who you are, but 99.999% of everybody born will be forgotten in 3 or 4 generations. They won't even remember who you are. I have no idea who my great-great-great-parents are. I don't even know their names, and I'm certainly not thinking about them. And the same will be true for me. No matter what I do, I won't be remembered. So you have to kind of make a difference right now.
Oof.
You can't really wait on that. And so I think it's better to be kind than right. I think one of my bits of advice is go to as many funerals as you possibly can, especially while you're young, and listen to what the people say about the departed person. I can guarantee you that they're not going to talk about their achievements, most likely. They're going to talk about how they made people feel, what their character was. And so that's what you have to focus on.
Kevin, thank you. That's everything. I wish I wish I lived next door to you. And for your sake, I'm glad we don't live next door, because Chatty Cathy would be over knocking on your door every single day. But thanks for walking to a different drummer and a drum beat than most people do. So, yeah.
It was a pleasure, Adam. Thank you for your great questions. I love your spirit. Wish you the best as you continue. And it was a pleasure chatting with you.
Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. As I said, he's a fascinating, interesting human being. And so I need to give a huge shout out to our amazing guest, Kevin Kelly. Kevin, thank you so much for the time with you. Thanks to our partner today, Vern Eide Motorcars. Go find out more about them at verneide.com. And lastly, but not least, thanks to each and every one of you who listens to the conversation. I do not take it for granted. Have a great rest of your day.